Hello, I'm Emma Penny, Managing Director of Feedinfo, and I'm delighted to be talking to you today with two of my colleagues about a new product that Feedinfo will be launching called Delphi. Delphi is a strategic business and planning tool for the feed additives and feed industries and comes to the market after more than a year of development. The key part of Delphi is a amino acids database covering the three key amino acids, and which will be followed also by a database covering the three key vitamins in the market. And part of it will also be backed with a plants and projects database, which will allow people to see what plants are producing which products and any new upcoming capacity. The main part of Delphi is the supply and demand databases, and these have taken thousands of data points which have been verified and checked and researched by us, and will allow people to see what has happened in the markets and in terms of supply and demand over the last few years, back to 2004 in most cases, and we will also be looking at forecasting forward as well. I'm joined today to talk about Delphi by Sam Weatherlake, who's our senior analyst and who's carried out all of the data research, verification, and has constructed the databases, and who will talk about some of the key themes to emerge from his work. And I'm also joined by lead analyst Martijn de Kock, who will talk about the opportunities that Delphi offers. Martijn, I'll start with you, because can you just tell me a little bit about where the idea for Delphi came from?
On the one hand, it's something we've been thinking about ourselves, and on the other hand, it's also driven by requests we get from the market. The main sort of activities within Feedinfo have always been around price reporting and news, and more recently events. And we did touch every now and then a bit on supply and demand data, but never in real detail. And also, if you look at the other industries and what's happening there, it's quite common to find supply and demand data on any given industry actually. So it was sort of funny, because also when we started doing the events over the last couple of years, we presented some high-level figures on main producers, on some demand figures in certain regions. And then after these events, always we were asked, okay, can you give us a bit more insight on how you go about, where you get the data from? I'll be quite interested to learn a bit more. So that confirms a bit our thought that there's a need for this in the first place, but also it would be a nice addition to our portfolio as Feedinfo. So that's why we started to do some research and started this project really.
Sam, I know that you have done really all of the work on this, and a lot of verification, checking, and sourcing data and pulling it together in the databases. Can you maybe talk about some of the key themes that have emerged as you've looked at this, and the conclusions that you've come to?
Well, I won't take you through everything that's happened since 2004. You'll be pleased to hear. But looking back over just the last couple of years, of course, it has been a dreadful period for the lysine and threonine producers, because African swine fever arrived in 2018 and swept through the Chinese swine herd, ultimately reducing it by more than 50%. And since lysine and threonine mainly go into swine feed, that had a huge impact on Chinese demand for those additives. A very different picture on methionine, though, because the poultry sector has expanded to compensate for the losses in the pork industry. And methionine is mainly used in poultry, so that has done very well over the last couple of years. And two large plants actually started up in the middle of last year, and their output seems to have been absorbed by the market with no difficulty at all.
You've seen some really key changes in the last few years. So I know that Delphi also, though, looks at sort of the current situation and sort of what future years are likely to bring as well. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about your forecasting as well?
Sure. Well, 2020 effectively is the first forecast year. And of course, this has been the year of the COVID-19 outbreak, which has suppressed demand across the board. So that has come as a further blow to the pork industry, and thus lysine and threonine. Now, on methionine, 2020 was looking like a very good year indeed. Early on, those producers reported very strong Q1 sales, The COVID-19 pandemic, of course, has had an impact there as well. So while 2020 is still looking like a good year for methionine, it won't be quite as spectacular in terms of demand as had been anticipated. So weaker recovery this year, but then we expect next year, when we certainly hope the impact of the pandemic will have diminished, we expect to see a stronger upturn in demand for all products, particularly methionine.
And you're working, you're talking about just the 3 key amino acids at the moment, but I know that you're also working on the vitamins database for Delphi as well.
That's right, yep. Yes, we're going to be introducing the 3 leading vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin B2 and vitamin E, in a few weeks' time.
Martijn, do you have anything to add about sort of what you're seeing in the markets at the moment, on top of what we've seen from Delphi?
Well, of course, it's interesting, just to come back shortly on the products that we've picked to start out with. When you look at animal feed, compound feed, premix, clearly a lysine, threonine, methionine, and the vitamins that Sam just mentioned are a real, let's say, a cost driver. They really have impact on animal feed in the micro ingredient segment. So that's one thing to start with. It's those are the key drivers. And when you look at markets, well, clearly, there's always some volatility around this. Right now, we're getting into a bit more calmer phase as we just coming out of, let's say, end of January until today, very volatile phase with the COVID-19 situation. There's been quite a lot of panic buying. People are well positioned in terms of inventory, also well positioned in terms of forward contracts, purchase contracts. So it's getting a bit more quiet now. There's enough stock in the market, and so that's a bit of the situation right now. But we've seen a huge price increase over the last months for several products. That includes the products we're talking about today, one a bit more than the other. So the question now is, it's getting calm, and what's the trend going to be? And clearly, supply and demand data is one of the drivers in that forecast.
And have there been some key things that have come out of Delphi that have surprised you, Martijn?
What sort of is interesting to see, and that is more touching on the forecast, is how that, but you will have to go into the data, is how that balance is changing a bit. And we've seen a lot of production that has come on the market in the last years, and that is now slowing down. And people are also looking into what's going to happen with demand. You hear stories in the news, and this is a bit more shorter, but still something to consider. You hear stories in the market about the meat processing industry and how that's all. It's a bit difficult right now. You see a change from people eating in restaurants to eating more at home. How does that change the protein intake? So having a bit of an outlook, a bit of a forecast on the supply and demand, that's quite interesting, of course, right now.
Can you just, we've talked about the sort of the databases and how they will sort of, give us supply and demand and some forecasting as well. But just talk us through exactly what people will get as part of a Delphi package.
Well, as we discussed, the history runs from 2004 to 2019. And we will also have a rolling 5-year forecast, which at the moment runs 2020 to 2024. And the database is structured around 4 key elements, which are capacity, production, consumption, and trade. And the capacity is tracked down to individual plant levels, so that subscribers will be able to see how each individual plant has developed over the years and what we expect to happen in the future. And the production and consumption, that is aggregated at country level, and that feeds through into regional and, of course, a global summary. The forecast is demand-based, and so we start by looking at where we think demand is going to go, and then we compare that with available capacity. And where the capacity is insufficient in the future to meet the demand projection, we introduce something called notional capacity, just as a way of indicating how much capacity we think would be required to meet that demand.
People will they will have access to, obviously, to the databases, to a plants and products database that will be regularly updated, quarterly reports and updates about what's happening in those specific markets, and also access, I think, to the analysts' team as well to be able to sort of clarify any questions they might have.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Martijn, you have come from a market background. You've sort of worked with lots of these sort of, some of these figures before. Just tell us a bit about how you think Delphi might be useful for companies.
Indeed, prior to Feedinfo, I was working in the animal feed industry as a buyer, but also as a salesman, working with specifically these kinds of products. And what has always been a sort of a frustration, let me call it like this, is when you go out there, there's coming back to what I said before, there's all sorts of information about prices, about main news. But if you really want to dig deep and understand where producers are based, where how they have developed over the last years, what are the main the trade lanes, so to say, where are the consumers, and how has the consuming behavior been in the past years, but also how that's looking a bit forward. I could not really find that, so that's why I'm of course quite excited about this project as well. If I just give a few examples of how it could be useful, because there's a wide range of applications, but say if you are a buyer and you want to get a better feel on where are all the producers based nowadays, where are their plants, what are they producing, what is their output, and how has that developed over the last years, and what is the expectation for the coming years. This database will give you that insight. It will give you a good idea of who is out there and how they are developing. And already, if you have that information, then at least you have an independent benchmark, because that's also quite useful to sometimes compare what you have already. So it could be very, for example, convenient for a purchaser just to look at their sourcing strategy. But you can also look at the other side. Myself, I've been a salesman for some amino acids, working at a distributor. I was always looking at markets on where are the compound feeders, where is the consumption of these specific amino acids? Has it shifted? What does the future look like? If you look into this data, you get a bit of a feel where the main trade is and where the main consumption is. So and again, you're able to compare with your own figures, so to see if you're on the right track. These are just two small examples, but you could use it in certain levels. You can use it also at management level to look at strategic forecasting, or to look at decision making. So it's quite wide, and this is just a few companies in the animal feed industry. We also work a bit with financial institutions who are following main players in the market, main producers. They like to also look at this kind of data. So there's actually a wide application where we see this could be very helpful in supporting the business.
Yes, I think that it will sit very well alongside the existing news and pricing coverage, which of course is looking at much more short-term, immediate developments, whereas this is more of a strategic planning tool. So I think it will be very much a complementary service to what we offer already.
Martijn and Sam, thank you very much for talking us through Delphi and how you feel it might be used and what it might offer, and some of the findings that you have discovered as well as part of your work, Sam. It's been really interesting, and I know that it's been a real in-depth project involving verifying tens of thousands of data points. I think this will be a very exciting product for the market and for people to be able to really plan their strategic outlook with some more certainty, and also to add some independent backing to some figures that people may already have within their own businesses. We're excited about Delphi. We hope you are too. Thank you.